Hi, my name is Christiana Garcia. I'm a high schooler with a bit of an unhealthy obsession with mock trial. And if you're watching this, I suspect you might share that same obsession. And you're in the right place. Because today's guest, one of the most accomplished international high school mock trial competitors out there, the 2024 Gladiator runner-up, an Empire awardee, and the former president of Shanghai High School's International Division, Alex Wang.
Hi, Christiana. Thank you for having me. I
Of
also have an unhealthy
course.
obsession with mock trials, so I'm glad to be here.
All mock nerds are welcomed at Mock Talk. So we're glad that you're here.
Yes.
So, Alex, you're one of our first international competitors we've ever interviewed.
That's that's exciting. I'm glad I'm making small firsts then. But yeah, we have I mean, at least over here, there's actually a lot of international mock trial competitors, at least in China. Actually, our school has a pretty large program, and everyone's really, really invested in this activity as well.
That's great. So, if I have this right, your team actually recently competed at PPMT, one of the most popular tournaments in China. Can you tell us how that went?
Sure, sure. So for some context, PPMT is basically the de facto Chinese national championship. It's gotten a bit smaller over the years, but it's still basically this tournament we prep for every single summer. It's like our big tournament of the year. We want to win every year because it helps, with the promotion every at the start of every school year for our club. But yeah, it went very well. We sent two teams, Annie and I. Annie is my co-president. She's very lovely. We captained an A team, and then we have another sophomore who's captained the B team, and then we won. Our A team won, and our B team came very close. They got fourth place, and it was a very fun experience. And every single year at PPMT, um, the organizing committee basically invites all these big name mock trial competitors. So Ian Lampert's here every single year, and the UCLA mock trial team, many of them are here every single year. So it's a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun.
Congratulations on winning first place.
Thank you, thank you.
So, how long have you been competing overall in mock trial?
Not that long, actually. I started in my freshman year. I have 1 year left of high school, which means this fall is going to be hellish. So only 3 years, really. Only three.
So far, like what roles have you done in your 3 years?
I think everything. And the reason why is because the way we do it is we have different teams for every single tournament. So I remember I started off doing double close in my first tournament. No, one open, one close in my first tournament. Then a few tournaments later, someone made me a crying witness, and I cried twice in two competitions. I never did it again. And then I opened before. I did a character witness. I did expert witnesses. So I think really the whole bag. But I mostly do closings and I mostly do attorneying.
Is closing arguments your favorite type of role you do, or do you wish they had you on something else?
No, I'm glad I do closings. Declosings are my thing. And then crossing, I guess that crossing witnesses is also something I really enjoy. But I love doing declosings.
So, Alex, for those who might not know, we've actually competed together in person and online. Unfortunately, I've seen many of your crosses of my own witnesses. Not great. But I kind of want to talk about what kind of sets you apart in this episode, your courtroom presence. So to start off, can you kind of walk us through the important pieces of what delivery looks like to your advocacy style?
Sure, sure. Before I answer that question, when you say we've competed a lot, that's very true, and Christiana is excellent. Whoever's watching this, please don't cut this out, Christiana. Whoever's watching this needs to know that Christiana is very impressive herself, and she could easily beat me any time of the day, I'm sure, depending on who has better luck that day. But let me answer your question, I guess, about what I think speaking matters and what elements make up speaking. For me personally, I basically talk about six elements of speaking. And before I talk about those six elements, I want to talk about why I think it's important to break speaking down. Because something I've realized in my 3 years of doing mock trial and speaking in general is that coaches love giving comments that are overly specific and broad and general that aren't actually translatable into practice. So I hear a lot of coaches saying, have more tone variation or, be more confident, be more big. And all those things are true, but but someone who's hearing that feedback is not going to know how to have more tonal variation if you just tell them to have more tonal variation. It's like you can't tell someone to sing better by just telling them to sing better. They're not going to sing better. So I like to break things down when I coach people on my team. And I think it's really 6 elements across the board. And I talk about this a lot, and I'll try to keep this not too long. Christiana, hopefully, I'll keep it under just a short while. But
Go
those
ahead.
6 elements, 3 are oral, 3 make tone variation, and the other three are basically these non-verbal elements. And I really hope that anyone who's watching this or anyone who's coaching in the future keeps this in mind because I think it's really going to help someone get better. The first of our 6 elements and our first verbal element is volume. It's basically how loud we're talking and how soft we're talking. And volume is probably the easiest thing you can change if you're speaking. So think of volume, let's say you're delivering any line, right? By just going louder and volume, then softer, then louder, then softer, then louder, then softer, you're able to create a build-up step by step by step, line by line, sentence by sentence, getting louder and louder and louder. Then getting really, really soft. These basic changes in volume is the first step in getting tonal variation. And let me preface, I have a bit of a stuffy nose today, so forgive me if I sound a bit weird. Number 2, apart from tonal variation, apart from volume, I can talk like this, or I can talk like this. Pitch is also another very important element in how you're speaking. So when we're looking at pitch, it's all the same idea as volume, is we want to have contrast. So if you want to sound somber and serious, someone's dying, it's a tragedy, you want to go lower, go down. If you want to sound incredulous, like this guy's crazy. I mean, he's wearing a Norway shirt and talking about pitch. Like what is he talking about? You want to go higher in pitch to sound more incredulous. And the other tip I normally give when I come to talking about pitch is this single idea that sometimes people end going up on a sentence. And it sounds weird, like they're incomplete, like they're not done with what they're saying. And that's really strange. So you want to go down at the end of a sentence if you want to sound complete. So the line I give to people I coach is basically climb on a comma and plunge on a period. So basically in between a sentence, you want to maybe go higher a little bit on a comma so that people are waiting to hear what's next. Then milk that pause and come back down. And that's pitch. That's the 2 of 3 elements that involve tone. The third element that involves tone is something I'm really not good at. It's speed. Is basically how fast you're talking, how slow you're talking, where you're pausing and where you're not pausing. I talk too fast, so I have no right to be speaking about this. But obviously, how fast you talk and then talking slowly is going to create a contrast that's tonal variation. So these 3 elements, volume, pitch, speed, basically make up what we really call tone. So next time you're thinking, how do I get more tonal variation? Just think, how can I change one of these factors? Then how can I change the second factor, then the third factor? Because in the end, the crux of speaking all comes down to one singular concept: contrast. Everything you do, every emphasis you have is just contrast. So if you want to emphasize a word, make sure that that word's volume, pitch, and speed are different from the words before it and after it. And normally I would demonstrate this if I was in front of like a group of students, but not now, I guess. And 3 more elements I'll cover very quickly. I'll try not to keep this too long. The fourth element is hand gestures. Obviously, be big, I have a, what do you call it? An acronym I use. It's basically the HOW acronym. Be high, be above your belly button, be out. Make sure if you have skinny arms like me, make sure they're not touching the torso. Be wide and be open. Basically, keep your hands forward. The fifth element is pretty simple. I can't do it right now because I'm sitting in a chair, or maybe I can. Basically, it's movement. Make sure you're moving in the well, obviously. The sixth element, and probably the most important element that separates good speakers from the best speakers is something that you really have to think about and you really have to get right. And before I tell you what it is, if you've ever watched a good speaker who's doing hand gestures, who's talking confidently, but still feels uncanny, stare into their face. Are they moving their eyebrows? Do they have expressions? That's the sixth element. Facial variance. These two eyebrows you have, and I have a lot of wrinkles on my forehead for some reason, although I'm like 17, which is a great thing for mock trial because it makes me very expressive. But basically, your face is the most important thing. You always have to be moving to convey the emotion in your tone. Your tone can tell me what to feel, but it's your face that makes me feel it. So those are the six elements I really like to go over. And I think there's nothing, I think I have a pretty polarizing style, but I don't think there's anything I'm doing differently apart from changing these six elements that everyone is. But I'm just changing them in a way that gives to a style, I think. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question.
Very insightful. I want to break down some of the things you were saying. So,
Sure.
Alex, you mentioned the six elements. First element, if I'm not wrong, was volume, right?
Yes.
So, for students who may be naturally like introverted or maybe are more soft-spoken, what are some tips you would give to making sure they take up that courtroom space with their volume?
Sure. I think I think two responses, I guess, to that. The first one is a physical thing. The second one is really the more important thing is how do you actually vary that volume, even if you can't talk really loud. The first one is project. And if you don't know how to project, go online, look for projection exercises, and just practice talking louder. That's not something I can really go over right now because you're not going to be able to talk louder in 10 minutes. You're just going to have to practice.
Yeah.
The second more important thing is that you don't volume doesn't mean you have to talk at a level 10. Volume contrast is not about talking at a 10 and then keep talking at a 10. It's about talking at a 7, then switching to a 3. And everyone can talk at a 7. And certainly everyone can talk at a 3 because we all know how to whisper.
Mm.
So I think what you can do to practice, especially if you're not so sure about tone and volume, is let's take any theme, right? What's a theme? Oh, the theme I always go back to is my one of my themes from freshman year. It's basically she took the risks, but the risks took her life. So she took the risks, but the risks took her life. That's the theme. Now, if you want to work on volume, first question you want to ask yourself, what are the words of emphasis? What do I want to emphasize in this theme? What is important in this line that I want people to remember? In this case, she took the risks took her life. The word of emphasis is probably going to be the two risks. The first risk at the end of the first clause and the last risk, the life, excuse me, at the end of the second clause. So let's just screw hand gestures, screw everything else, just work on volume. Okay, working on volume then. I'm going to deliver it with basically the same volume throughout. She took the risks, but the risks took her life. Boring. No tonal variation, no volume contrast. Okay, now I want to get contrast. I want to emphasize those two words. So I want to go louder on risks and life, and then I want to go softer on every word before it. Not whispering, just softer. Because if I'm softer on the words before it and I go louder on that word, it's going to have more contrast. So then let's then if I were to deliver it and uh, let's say just focus on volume. This is my volume. She took the risks, but the risks took her life. That's a bit better. Normally, it'd be better, I guess, if you're really in a courtroom, you're allowing yourself to project louder. If you're living with your parents or if you're living with a roommate, I guess don't shout in your house because that would not be good for them. But that's just a basic idea. Like you can even make it increase volume even more. It's all about just building that contrast. So find the words of emphasis for anyone watching. Find the word of emphasis, make that word louder or softer, and then make every word before and after it less loud or less soft. And you're going to have volume variation right there.
You mentioned earlier delivery is all about kind of making it dynamic, is about contrast.
Yes.
Sometimes in mock trial, and I'm sure you've seen this too, Alex, it's like the mock accent and also they're speaking at the same like pace and they're not changing their speed whatsoever. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. So over here we call it a moccent, a mock accent, we call it a moccent. I have very strong opinions about this, and reasonable people will disagree about this, but I personally am very against it. Not because I think it sounds robotic, it does, but I think a more tactical reason is really two things. Is number one, you're not being authentic because good morning, Your Honor. My name's blah blah blah. I'm representing. Like that sounds fake. It's not you. No one. You're not a real person when you're saying that. So that's the first reason is I think it's not authentic. The second reason is probably the most important reason why I hate a moxon is because you're not allowing yourself to vary between tones. What I mean by that is the best speakers vary not just their tone within one section, they vary the genre of their tone throughout their entire speech. What do I mean by genre of tone? What I mean by genre of tone is basically is maybe at the beginning of their speech, the first minute of their speech are sounding normal, they're talking like this, and then in the second part of their speech, they're going, folks, um, yeah, so the burden is beyond a reasonable doubt, and it's a pretty high burden. And then they're going more serious again. They're changing the color of their tone. They're going from serious to conversational. So the entire genre of their tone is changing. If you're talking a moxie, you're only going to have one genre of tone, which is that repeated cadence, boom, boom, boom. And I'm not a huge fan of it. But some great competitors have it and they're excellent and they make it work. I just personally don't, it just doesn't personally work for me. And I think that, at least in my experience, I think one does better if one speaks without that moxon.
So if someone was to break their mock scent, what are some tips you would have for someone to practice their different varying speeds when speaking?
Yeah. The first thing is ask yourself, why are you talking in a moxon? And the reason probably why, and at least I'm guessing, I'm speculating, it's all 602, but I
Objection,
think
speculation.
yes, it'd be sustained, but I think the reason why is because it makes you feel comfortable and in the zone. And I get that. As in everyone has a different voice when they're talking in a speech. It makes them feel comfortable. So at least my friends who have a mox and they default to it because it's what's comfortable when they're on a stage. So with that in mind, now that we know that it's not that you can't speak without a moxon, it's just that you had to snap out of it. And anyone who says they can't speak without a moxon is wrong because they can all engage in normal human conversation without sounding like, "Hi, my name's No, you're able to talk normally. So I think if you want to break out of a moxon, I think it's really I guess it's two things. The first thing is basically talk normally. Like just read the speech. Read it conversationally. Read it so that when your mom looks at you when you're delivering it, she won't go, "Why are you talking like that?" She'll be able to think you're talking about it normally. So just first of all, just practice delivering it, not even delivering it actually, just practice basically reading it, voicing it normally. Then try to create a new tone by just varying those tones without snapping into the cadence. Okay, so number two, what is the cadence then? If I'm really struggling, how can I, element by element, stop talking a moxon? At least based off my own observation, I think a moxon has a few elements that make people talk that way. The first one is really rounded vowels. They say, "Good morning, Your Honor. My name," instead of "Good morning, Your Honor, my name." It's so rounded when they talk. So try to make it not so rounded. let that cavity in your mouth close. Talk normally. Don't make it so rounded. The second one is everyone goes up at everything. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Alex Wang, whatever it is. I don't know actually. But everyone goes up. Stop going up. Go down. When you go down, you sound confident. Good morning, Your Honor. Just go down. Sound like a human. Sorry, that was mean. But I think the last part, and probably the something that I had to work on, is everyone develops a fake stutter. As in, they say, "Good morning, Your Honor." But members of the jury, there's a stutter at the end, at the beginning of a word. Stop fake stuttering. Just say the word normally. And I think those three things basically is rounded vowels, going up, having that fake stutter are the key characteristics of a mox. And I think if you really can't talk normally, work on killing those three things and you're going to sound more normal and more authentic.
So you mentioned earlier that mock scents typically are just trying to, they're kind of like a mask people put on trying to be more
That's very true.
confident. Um, so kind of I've noticed, Alex, you're a very confident person in general. So what are some tips you would give to maybe some people who aren't as confident out there who are trying to break the mock scent?
Oh, that's a good question, and I appreciate it because half the time I'm just faking it. But I think that's the answer is really, but to everyone out there who's not confident, I promise you, you're better than you think, for sure. Because everyone's at a stage, everyone gets nervous. Like everyone at some point when they're in the round, everyone's gonna get nervous. It's normal. So how do we become more confident? I think the first thing you have to understand about confidence, I think, is what is the key component of confidence? And something I've learned is being confident really just means being comfortable. If you're comfortable where you are, you'll be confident being there. I mean, that's just the definition, right? You're confident because you believe in yourself. How do you believe in yourself? You're comfortable where you are. So how do you come off as more comfortable and confident? I think the first a few ways to fake the confidence is one of those elements I talked about. The first way, the easiest way to fake confidence is just move your hand gestures really high, basically. The best demonstration, I mean, unless I stand right now, it's hard to show. But the best demonstration I show is if your hands, let me be brief. But if your hands are like saying your hands are like here, and you're going, "Hi, Christiana is interviewing me," compared with, "Hi, Christiana's interviewing me." The latter is going to sound much more or look much more confident just by moving your hands up. And so the first thing is whatever you're doing, force yourself to move your hands up. I think the next thing for confidence is having energy. Energy is really, really important. Now, what the heck does energy mean? I think energy also comes back down to two key components that can help someone become more confident. The first way to become more confident, I think, to develop energy is just talk louder. I mean, it doesn't mean shout, but just on average, move your baseline a little bit higher. Because if you're talking like this, and even if you're doing all that tonal variation, I'm gonna think that you don't want to be there, or you didn't have enough coffee in the morning, or that you were up all night doing whatever. So just talk louder. That doesn't mean shout. It just means talk louder on average. Move the baseline up. I think the next small trick I would do is to be more confident, which is a small thing, but people don't actually know how important it is. This is especially for witnesses. It's just smile a little bit more. As in, if someone's like, "Hi, I'm Alex," compared with, "Hi, I'm Alex." Over time, if you're always, I guess, more happy, more pleasurable, more smiley, I think it's going to help you come off as more comfortable because you're going to look like you want to be there more. So, in my experience, at least for witnesses especially, that's how I would get more confident if you want to fake it. If you want to get confident over time, um, I'm sorry. You'll have to talk to your coach to give you those affirmations and compliments which you deserve because you deserve them.
Another tip to get more confident is have an awesome Norway shirt.
I hope so.
Um, no, but honestly, sometimes you don't really realize how powerful you are in the courtroom. So if you ever have tape from rounds, go ahead and watch that tape and try to observe yourself from like the third person because sometimes you really realize like, oh, that was like a good thing I did on cross, or that was actually really good tone variation. And that helps in the past has helped me build my confidence.
Most people are too self-critical when they're watching tape, which I guess is not a terrible thing, but it's also not a good thing for your, I guess, for your mind and for yourself.
Speaking of tape, Alex, I think it's time for you to watch some tape of yourself.
Uh, yes. This is when the Norway shirt stops working.
The confidence wears off. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, so basically, right now we're going to head into a segment of where we're going to watch one of Alex's closing arguments, the one from the 2024 Gladiator Championship round. And we'll kind of stop, give some commentary, and Alex, you can walk us through your thought process and anything you'd probably want to do differently now, about a year
Oh,
later.
so many. So many. Yes. In my opinion, in that Gladiator final round, I made a lot of mistakes, which I think are good learning tips. I think just basic mistakes here and there, like talking too fast, which is something we should all try to avoid. Something I've been trying to avoid myself.
For those who haven't seen this round before, can you give us some background?
Sure. Oh, yes. So it was the Gladiator final round a year ago. So in 2024, and it was 1v1v1 because it was a special 10-year thing that Justin Bernstein and William Warhay were doing. And basically, it was prosecution against two defendants, and I was defending one of the defendants. And I was against two absolutely phenomenal competitors. I know you had Marvin Xantis here earlier. That man is a genius. He is legendary. And then there's Karthik Rathina Sabapathy, who I was very glad to pronounce his last name properly in the round. He's also literally extraordinary. They're both excellent. And it was really a true pleasure to compete against them. I thought they were both phenomenal in that round.
We really were. And if we ever have Karthik on, I'd have to learn how to pronounce his last name because it's a
Yes.
mouthful. Let's get started.
Is what matters. Thank you. May I please record? They were tricked by a thief. Members of the jury, someone's here who shouldn't have. They're not here because they were able to show you evidence, or able to show you proof, or able to show you anything that connects her to this crime. Because you understand the only thing they rely on, the only thing that puts Miss Wei in this courtroom is the thief's own words, members of the jury. You don't have to take off. Mr. Exanthus, in his closing argument, literally came up and told you, don't believe a thief. But you know, members of the jury, what they did, they believed a thief. But you can't make that same mistake Mr. Exanthus did. You know, it can be difficult and confusing with all those.
I'm going to pause right there because we're seeing in real time your HOW acronym coming into play.
Right. So I guess the first thing is being high. I'm always making sure my hand gestures are high. Out, I'm making sure my hand gestures aren't too close to my body, and I'm being out basically being forward. I'm not keeping them too close to my body, and wide is just I'm not basically gluing my arms to my body, basically. But yeah, can I talk about what I think I'm not doing so well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The first thing I'm sure you guys all recognized, or at least I recognize, is I am talking so unnecessarily fast. And the negative effect of this is I think part of the reason was there was a lot of adrenaline in my body because it was like the closing of the round, and I just could not control my speed. And I tried to control it by pausing between words that didn't always merit a pause, and so it sounds very choppy. And so in the future, I think for anyone who's watching this, and for myself at least, how I've tried to slow things down is to not pause between every word, but to drag out your vowels. Make every word longer to make your overall pace slower. Don't say everything same pace with pauses. That sounds staccato. You want to be very legato when you're talking. Big mistake I made in this closing. But it gets on my nerves when I watch myself do this. But yeah.
I think it's great. And I just realized you're kind of using like musical terms. Alex, is that kind of how you view speaking in a way?
Oh, that's a great question. Is speaking music? I think a lot of the same things translate. Uh, I think part of pitch. I know a lot of people say warm up your voice before you speak by just doing saying scales. I know some people who do that, so I think a lot of it is translatable but I think the concept is the same as you want to sound good, and in speaking, the way to sound good is being persuasive, and sing the way to sound good, I guess, is just being beautiful. And sing beautifully. I mean, so yeah, I guess they're analogous closely.
Everything that's happening in today's trial. But you can't listen to the lies and not the law, the falsehoods and not the facts, the tricks and not the truth. The truth is, members of the jury, that with all the lies the thief was telling, with all the lack of evidence the prosecution had, they just got lost. And they were tricked by the thief. Members of the jury, they're charging this way for theft of major artwork today. That's a felony, members of the jury. They can't just come up and say, this cash is here, the words of a thief is enough. It's not, members of the jury. Because they need more than a stack of coincidences to find someone guilty. Because their burden is not coincidence. It's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the most difficult burden of any prosecutor in any courtroom for any crime, members of the jury. It's so I literally.
I have a question. So typically coaches say, don't turn your back to the jury. And in this video, you've done it a few times. What's kind of
Yeah.
your thought process for doing that?
I completely agree with that statement. Is you should not turn your back to the jury. I think I did it too many times. I think if you do it once strategically, it's good. But I think over here it was a mistake to do it as many times as I did. I think that the only time where you want to is really, I guess, the only two times where you want to turn your back is when you're intentionally trying to show like a backwards metaphor, and the second time is if you want to show, I guess, some scorn to opposing counsel, but you do it very strategically. So it's not like you're doing it to the jury. But over here, I think I overdid it.
Hmm. Okay, so this next part, a little bit of a spoiler. This is like my favorite part of the closing, and everyone will see why in 1 second. Okay, just rewind a bit.
Guilty. Because their burden is not coincidence. It's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the most difficult burden of any prosecutor in any courtroom for any crime, members of the jury. It's so I literally could have, in opening statements, took my seat right here, looked at Mr. Exantis in the eyes and said, "You know me. I don't have to show you anything or answer you a single question because it's not my burden." Members of the jury, I'd be exactly right because they failed to meet that burden today. These are three key questions they just could.
The iconic chair bit, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
What was really funny is if you actually watch really closely, is I'm looking at Marvin Exantis when I'm saying that, and he purposely looks away and looks down, and I thought that was brilliant the way he does. Small thing he did. Yeah.
So a lot of people wouldn't go and sit in a chair in the middle of their closing arguments, but it's definitely something very fun and dynamic you did. Alex, what's kind of your thought process for making those big and bold decisions?
Right. So I think that's a great question, and I think every speech or every something needs a TV moment. It needs one moment that someone is going to be able to think about when they wake up tomorrow morning. I think that it's important to not overdo it, and a big issue I have is I overdo it, is I do too many of these big moments, and then so every big moment looks not as big. But I think for most people that's not that but much of an issue. So I think that everyone just think of a TV moment to do. Don't be crazy. Like don't stand on a table, but just think of a line or something that just makes them go, "Whoa, wait, I like that." Now, strategically, you don't want to overdo it. And I think I might have overdone it many times in my career, at least, is because the judges who like that kind of stuff are gonna score you well if you do one or two of those things. If you do it 3 or 4 times, you're gonna lose those judges, and you're gonna lose all the judges who don't like you in the first place. So I think it's a stylistic thing. I personally like the theatrics. I like the bigness. I don't know if that's a word, the bigness, but I like the flair of mock trial. Some people hate it, and that's totally fair. Um, but yeah, I always tell people who come to me, I just say take risks, be crazy. I didn't do this in my preliminary rounds at Gladiator because I didn't think it would score well, but it was a final round and I said screw it, like this thing is not going to make me lose. So I just did it and I thought it was fun and I'm glad I did.
I'm glad you did it too. It was definitely like one of those big TV moments. So up to this point, Alex, was there anything you were kind of seeing in the tape that maybe you would tell the viewers to do differently?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I'm moving so much. Like I am walking back and forth like as if, you know, I can't find a metaphor right now, but I'm just walking back and forth always. Allow yourself to stand still, which is something I don't do. It's just allow yourself to not move. And then when you do move, it's more important and it's more contrasting and it stands out that more. So I think that's one thing is I'm just moving too much. And apart from the talking too fast thing, talking blah 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 thing, I think another thing I can do is I could have allowed myself to vary my volume more, but it's more difficult because those larger rooms, so I had to project. But I think one thing is, for instance, when I said that triplet is basically it's the lie is not the law, the something and not the facts, the tricks not the truth, is I could have actually said those middle words, something not, something not, something. And I could have allowed that middle word to be a bit quieter to allow the two words I'm emphasizing to be more contrasting. So I think those things I just small mistakes I don't think I would have made. I think I wouldn't hopefully not make today, but just those basic changes to tone, I think. Yeah. And too fast, too fast, too fast.
It's okay. If you slow it down when you rewatch the video at like what's it called? Like you can like go on YouTube and like slow it down, then it's the perfect speed.
Oh, really? I need to try that.
I do it for all my YouTube videos. Shout out Dr. Lampert for showing my mock trial class that because ever since I've been addicted to doing that.
Oh, I need to do that now too.
Not answer. I'll walk you through them one more time. Why would Miss Sweat, if she ever did hire a criminal like the thief? I want you to remember what Miss Kidd said when she took that stand. She wasn't someone who was the Michael Jordan of not getting caught. Rest of the jury want to be clear. Miss Sway is a billionaire. She could hire anyone in the world, and they want you to believe she hired someone who was arrested 100% of the time, convicted 100% of the time, thrown in jail 100% of the time for every single crime she's committed. That's what they want you to believe. Because members of the jury, they've got to show you more than a stack of coincidences. Because if you think it's a reasonable possibility that maybe someone like Miss Sway, if she ever did hire a criminal, wouldn't choose to hire someone like Miss Kidd, who's been arrested for every single crime she's committed. And that's reasonable doubt. And that reasonable doubt is all that it takes for you to find Miss Sway not guilty. Moving on to number 2. Where's the proof that Miss Sway offered the thief any money? Members of the jury, I want you to remember the agent who went on this stand, right there. He sat down and looked at you. He said, the thief lied. But believe it. Because guess what? She's the one who said Miss Sway offered money. She's the one who said Miss Sway gave her $1 million to steal the helmet. You know what she also said? You know what the government themselves admitted, what Agent Palat had to admit on this stand because that was the truth? Was that was someone Mr. Exanta said you can't believe. Someone they admitted was a confessed liar that they didn't even trust themselves. Members of the jury, they can't have it both ways. They can't tell you in one breath that, actually, you know what? Miss Kidd's a liar. The thief's a liar. She lied about not committing this crime. Lied about everything that happened, about whether or not she knew this way, and then in the other breath tell you, actually, no. In this line here, about Miss Wang. She was telling the truth. Listen to the jury. That's their case against Miss Wang. They want you to believe someone who they said was a liar, who they said lied to their face, who they said can't be trusted. That's who they want you to trust.
So at this time, you've pointed to the woman you're defending a few times. Was there a specific reason you might have not walked over there and like put your hand on her shoulder?
I don't recall why I didn't. I think two reasons, which are, I guess you could. I don't think that'd be big harm, but I think two reasons. Number one, I think I did too many of those big moments already. Going over there, I think putting her, normally it's great, but I think for me, I already walked to the witness stand, I already walked, sat down on my chair. I think it's a bit too much. I think the second reason is when you're thinking about your speech, is not mock trial theme, but what is the thematic theme of your speech? What is the theme of your rhetoric? Sometimes in a murder case, it's the victim died, it's so sad. Sometimes it's, oh, you're suing the wrong person, you're charging the wrong person, it's so sad. In this case, I wasn't really talking about how sad it was for Miss Wei, so that wasn't where the emotional point was. So I didn't want to try to like milk that part as well when I was trying to focus on like the truth element of it all.
I think that's a really good insight on not always having to commit to that moment of like having it be emotional in a closing argument.
Mm.
That's their proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Because members of the jury, I want to talk about that last point Mr. Examiners talked about. At home. In its words. He spent all the cross-examination, the examination trying to say that Miss Wei was there. Walker was right there. So I ask my third question. Why didn't Miss Wei pick the helmet up? Because members of the jury, Mr. Xanthus talked all on closing arguments about how she had a will. We agree. Her will is to complete this collection Mr. Xanthus showed. This single frame that's missing in her house. Is that home? In that frame today? Is that home? Where they said Miss Wei would put it? Members of the jury, is that home? Where it would be if Miss Wei actually stole?
So right there, you just used one of the exhibits from the case, and it was done pretty effectively. Do you have any tips on using exhibits in a closing argument to really make sure that it's sealing the deal rather than distracting?
Yes, I think the first point is you have to use exhibits in closing. That's the crux of a closing argument is you're summarizing the evidence. So, if you use exhibits in trial and you're not using them in closing, then you're not really summarizing the evidence. So I think always use exhibits in closings. Now, on your questions, how do you make it work? Now, in this case, that was Marvin's demo. He used a KT board, so it was helpful. I could just pull it up and show it. But I think just it comes back to the same idea as how can you again, an exhibit is a visual element. So how can you have a good moment when you're holding it up in the air? Is there something you can point at or something you can do with the exhibit? For instance, in my freshman year, this was my sophomore year, my freshman year, I used a bunch of exhibits, put them on the floor, and basically try to show that that was like a metaphor for crossing the line. In this PPMT summer, I used exhibits as a witness, and I put them around the courtroom to basically show the layout of certain parts of the house in question. But for context, everything I think in the third fact, most of my closing, but everything in the third fact is entirely improvised because my theory for my preliminary rounds was basically where's the helmet? Like the case is about a stolen helmet. I said where's the helmet? Not you didn't find the helmet. That's not evidence. And then in the final round, 30 minutes before the round, Justin Bernstein pulls out the helmet in an awards ceremony and says, "Hey, we found the helmet." It was in this locker, so I had to scrap half my theory before. So a lot of this was, I guess, less clean, but the idea is the same.
So, do you have any like rules you kind of have in place when you pick what exhibits to use in a closing? Do you usually use two to three, or like what's the limit?
I say use at least. I say a good time. I guess it depends on the case. I think if it's a 2 versus 2 case like TOC, 1 or 2 is at least 1, 2 is I guess optimal. I think if it's a 3 versus 3 case, maybe 2 to 3 I think is a good amount. More I guess doesn't hurt if you're using it for a purpose. I think. Just you want to make sure you're using when you're using more. You want to make sure you're using them and not just listing them.
Mm.
They want you to believe that someone who wanted to steal the helmet would just leave it in a locker for a year. Just keep it somewhere they can't put on display, somewhere they can't even see members of the jury. Because let's be clear. When they spent all this time talking about how Miss Wei wasn't here, how Miss Wei was there a day before it was locked, just take their own agent's words who told you. The witness, sir, didn't even identify Miss Wei. They identified the thief. The thief who they trusted with their words, who they trusted with their case against Miss Wei because they were tricked by the thief. Mr. Xantis can talk all he wants about coincidences. How coincidence after coincidence is no longer a coincidence, but the fact of the matter is, members of the jury, Miss Wei just got in the wrong place with the wrong person at the wrong time, and quite frankly, a conversation isn't a conspiracy, and a coincidence isn't a crime. Unless they can show you more, unless they can show you they dispelled every single reasonable doubt, all they have are the tricks by the thief. Sure, Mr. Dennis is going to come out here and tell you how to win, how to win. And remember that she was the first to admit that she wanted to get it.
Okay, this is like your signature move in the courtroom, Alex. Leaning on the podium, sometimes hands in the pocket too.
Yes. I was first. I'll talk about the hands in the pocket. Some people hate it. Some people love it. I say don't do it too much. Do it if you really want to use. I do. I have this like I'm not even trying to do it. I just when I talk, my hands are just always in my pocket, and so it comes into my speaking. But I think it helps if you use it sparingly at the right places. In terms of leaning on things, I say do it, and I'm very, very for doing it because, again, everything's about being comfortable in the courtroom. And if you're talking authentically and you're talking like a real person and you're leading on a podium, as long as it's not disrespectful, at least it shows you're comfortable. So as long as you don't overdo it, I think it's always fine. And I like basically if you're comfortable in the courtroom, you're gonna come off as confident usually. And I just happen to like leaning on things. I don't know how this started. I think I just saw the podium one day and said, I'm gonna lean on it, and it did not hurt. So I kept on doing it.
That's the origin story right there. Is there any other things you like to do in the courtroom to come across as comfortable and confident?
Sure, I think a few things. I guess there's so many small things, but apart from the ones I mentioned, the movements have to be natural. And I move too much here, but a big reason movements aren't natural when people do them is because they're not moving when they're speaking. They're moving when they're done talking, then talking again. And that's kind of strange. Doesn't, we all know the speaker's triangle, right? And why it looks so formulaic is because going number one, blah, 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 blah. Number two, blah, blah, blah. No, like that's weird. So what you want to do is you want to move when you're talking. If you want to move from point A to point B, don't just finish talking, then move. No, move a little when you're talking. So talk a little when you're moving. So then it feels more natural that everything's not so scripted. But don't overdo it like I did.
Got
She had it away, and that was legally. Legally. With $40 million. When he comes back here and tells you to believe the lies that you have, to believe the story they said can't be trusted, I want you to remember that we're in a court of law. And in a court of law, it's not what's best at lying or cooking up the most believable story that matters. It's the truth that matters.
So, Alex, what are your overall thoughts?
Uh, I had a lot of fun doing it. And I think that's the most important thing is if you have fun doing something, it's not going to be terrible. But I think what I would say is just summarize what I've said before. I'm talking too fast. I'm not allowing myself to milk the moment. For instance, normally after you say a big line, pause and then talk later if you want, but I need to slow my speed down. That's probably the most important thing. And the next thing, the next level, which I don't do here, is allow yourself, I think, to change the way. If you watch a speech, I'm mostly talking in like that same voice, I guess the same genre of tone. I could have switched that up a little bit. I could have been much more, I guess, folksy at some points if I wanted to, maybe during the burden or something. That would have, I think, changed and made things more varying. I think that's good because a big reason why some people have really good tonal variation, but then after 3 minutes it sounds monotonous anyway, is because they're just repeating the same intonation pattern every minute. So 9 minutes, the same 1 minute intonation pattern. So change that whole genre of tone up a little bit.
When you mean genre of tone, in your mind, what are the different genres?
I think the simplest one is just the first genre is just the serious voice you're talking, like the competent mock trial voice. Whatever it is you do. I think the next thing is just be really conversational. Like instead of saying members of the jury, we're charging them with murder today. Yeah. Conversational be and members of the jury, that's why we're charging them with murder today. Is because I know the prosecution, no, the defense wants to say, oh, it's reasonable doubt, there's reason. I get it. That's their burden. But in the end, you have to look at the facts. I mean, like that's a different kind of genre. Maybe it's not so good. Maybe you don't like it much, but allow yourself to vary that up a bit. And you can be incredulous, sound like something is crazy, or I guess be really sad and just switch the personalities. Basically, have multiple personalities or genres at once. I think.
So, in the closing, what are some things you would say you did really well for the viewers who are watching this to kind of like maybe to copy or take away from?
Hmm. Well, oh, that's hard. Uh,
Don't be too self-critical. I think you were really, really great at like the content of your closing. I really liked sometimes how you did like groups of three with your alliterations.
I think on that point, I think on the rhetoric point, what I did well, but I think I could do better as well, is just everyone needs to find a targeted, again, not mock trial theme, but like actual theme, the word theme, like rhetoric theme. Find a perspective to look at your rhetoric for. And I think what I did well here is the consistent emphasis on it's about truth. I start with law. I end with about how the truth is what matters. I'm talking about lies throughout. So the thematic perspective I'm looking at this from is truth. So all my rhetoric is about truth. And something I see a lot of people do is they have one thing about truth, then they have another thing about how it's so sad, then they have another thing about how, oh, it's you know justice and whatever. All are great, but they're not great together. It has to be focused. So I think what I do well is I focused on the truth part and I don't really sway into like, oh, Miss Sway is gonna cry on her bed every single she's not gonna have a bed, she's gonna be sleeping on a cot for the rest of her life. I don't focus on that. Although I could have if I wanted to, but I don't focus on that. And so I think the rhetoric that you'd use in closing has to, or basically throughout your entire case, has to be specific towards one theme, not mock trial, but theme. Hopefully that theme is also in line with your actual theme.
So, Alex, I want to hear a little bit more about your mock trial takes. You
Sure.
talked a little bit about this like earlier, but what are some things you think separates the good performers from the truly great ones in mock trial?
That's an excellent question. I think it all, if I had to boil it down to one thing, I think it really boils down to one trait. And something that people have asked me is, what do you think is the most important personality trait in mock trial? And what I've always answered is, it's wit, as in it's how witty you are. And this really leads to everything. As in, if you're I don't like Moxons. Some great competitors have Moxons, but I think some good competitors do, and they have to get higher level. I think the one way is just if you're witty, you're allowing yourself to be you, and to be witty, you have to be you. So you have to talk normally. And if you're witty, then you know what you're doing. Then you're being confident. But most importantly, is just people who have wit allow themselves to be themselves, and they're allowing themselves to be big and be confident and being comfortable. So I think for the advice I would give to people, and the advice I gave to someone from my program who asked me this a couple weeks ago. It's like, how do I get? It's my senior year. How do I get better? And I say, be crazy. Like, be absolutely crazy. Like, okay, if it's an actual round and it really, really matters, fine. Be a bit more reserved. But if it's a scrimmage, be crazy. Try that new thing. As in, if you're allowing yourself to push the boundaries of what you can do, it's easier to come back in than to walk step by step. The metaphor I use is it's easier to blow a balloon and let air out later than it is to blow air one breath at a time. So allow yourself to be crazy. Do that thing that your coach says you can't do, I guess in private. And then if it works, try it. But always, always, always be witty. Always try that new thing. Be crazy. And I think the people who are great, like Ian Lampert, who I really do admire, and I'm sure you're, Dr. Ian Lampert, you're very familiar with him, I'm sure, Christiana. But he allows himself to do whatever the heck he wants to do. And he makes it work because he believes in what he is doing. And I think that's wit. And I think that's what makes someone great.
There are some like really iconic moments in within the mock trial community that like you really just see someone's like wit and their personality come out. Do you have any moments you kind of just like think back to and you're like, that's my Roman Empire from maybe some old film?
Oh, it's yes, there are plenty. There are two I go to, and they're a bit different. The first one is very iconic, is Daniel Stern pulling out the tape, the measuring tape, and just dragging it to the back of the courtroom. I mean, I think that's a concept that is fantastic, and it's also a concept that's emulatable, if that's a word. You can emulate elsewhere. As in, you can walk to the back of the courtroom to demonstrate space, use the well. It's just the same concepts, but blown up and made a big moment. The second one I go to is on a different level of wit. It's Ian Lampert's 2014 closing. And it's there's something missing from it's that same classic declosing he always does. And it's not super flashy. It's not super like, oh, he's moving everywhere. But it demonstrates, I think, the ability of yourself to take something. You don't have to be flashy to make something hit. And I think that's the best evidence of that is really using your tone in the most uh, up and down way possible, the most contrasting way possible.
When it comes to your own skills, do you have any skills you think kind of are underrated in the mock trial community you think deserves more hype?
Oh, that's a great question. Uh, Underrated. I think I've talked about this maybe in the past. I don't think authenticity is underrated, but I think it's not very done. It's not people want to sound confident more than they want to sound authentic or sound human. And I don't quite understand that. I kind of do, as in it's important to be confident. But in the end, if you're all about being confident and talking with a mock accent, for instance, or doing the same things you've already done, like saying the same rhetoric you've already said, there's no creativity there. But being authentically you, I think, allows for that. So I think there are two dimensions to look at this is number one is the delivery aspect is are you talking as a human being? The second aspect I would say is when most people try to be good at mock trial, they just use what already works. As in a lot of people I see, they just copy the same lines that people have done in the past, they just use them again and again and again. These one-liners that always kind of work because they're just, I guess, universal. But if you want to be great, you have to be creative. You have to find what works for you. So I had a rule for myself in freshman year is I will never use the same one-liner or the same piece of rhetoric twice. At least, okay, like across competitions. If I say something for this closing, even if it's excellent, I'm not going to use it again in the next competition, even if I thought it was brilliant. That forced me to think of new lines, and that forced me to come up with better lines, though I didn't think that was possible at the time. So I think that's an important skill. Is just force yourself, stand up, look at an object and start talking and improvising based off that object until something brilliant comes to your mind. Force yourself to be you so that you can be creative and be different. Because in the end, if you're the same as everyone else, what makes you better? Unless it's something special about you. So I think that's my answer.
That's like a mic drop moment.
I I I I Yeah, I do think it's important though, authenticity.
People are a little bit scared to take those bigger risks and to be creative and authentic because they don't want to lose ballots. What's kind of your thought process when it comes to potentially losing ballots?
Right, so that's a very important consideration. As in, mock trial is yeah, ultimately mock trial's about winning as well. Like you have to win. If you're doing something absolutely crazy and all the judges hate you, that's not going to be very great. So I think two parts is first of all is the context you're in, as in, are you on a team? Are you what are you doing? And the second competition is what's the judging pool. The first part is obviously team wise, you can't just try to be crazy yourself and then screw your team over. Like obviously that's how you lose as a on a team. So I think what's important though is vary it within your team, as in capture more of the judges based off the attorneys on the team. As in if your opener is very, I guess, conversational, just very, very normal conversational, then you have a bit more leeway to be more serious and I guess be more of that traditional, slowly talking, deep voiced attorney. And if the third person, I guess, who's doing something other role on the team, they can be, I guess, flashier and be crazier. And that's a good way, I guess, to capture more of the team, more of the judges' ballots. Because something I see is a lot of teams, everyone just sounds the exact same. Like they're all the same. And so it's very hard to distinguish themselves from that. The second part, I think, is the judging pool is, yeah, some judges aren't going to like everything. If you're at Empire, for instance, they don't like the Flash. That's not their thing, right? If you're at IMT, they like the Flash more because there are more college competitors and less, I guess, less practicing attorneys. But what you have to consider is, okay, even if you're at Empire and you have to be, I guess, more reserved and more reticent about what it is, the Flash you're trying to show, that doesn't mean you can't be you. Who's like, if you, there's more to someone than being crazy, obviously. So even if you're being conversational, use a funny simile. Find a funny analogy. Like you can deliver things the way they want it, but the content can still be you. The content doesn't have to follow the same rigid structure everyone's done before. Even if you have to, I guess, talk in that same way that Empire likes, okay, say something really, I don't know, be quirky. Find this weird analogy that's gonna persuade them. So I think that's that. And when it comes to Gladiator, I had this thought as well is, I don't know what the judging pool is going to be like. I have a very polarizing style. Should I tone it down? And I remember thinking to myself is, I'm not going to do that. Why? It's because I thought to myself, if I just be very toned down like everyone else, I might do well, but I guess I'm never gonna break anything. I'm never gonna break to the top. So I thought, high risk, high reward. I might lose all their ballots or I might win all their ballots. I'm going to take this option. And that's kind of what happened is there were three judges, two judges kind of hated me, one judge would love me, or two judges loved me, one judge hated me. And that's just the way it works. So you have to hedge your bets maybe where you want to go all in on one style. I decided to go all in because I thought, I'm here already. Why not? Why do I not try to win then? So that was my consideration. But yeah, talk to your coaches. Listen to them, obviously, in the end. Listen to your coaches, I think. But you can always argue with them a little bit if they're, I guess, not too scary.
I mean, mock trial coaches are mock trial. You're here to argue, so why not?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Speaking of coaches, what are some pieces of advice you've gotten from a coach or judge about delivery that's kind of like reshaped how you view it?
About delivery. I don't know if there was one thing about delivery, but uh, I think, again, I admire Ian Lampert a lot, and I think something he told me, can I kind of change your question to about content, if I may? I think
Go
I don't know.
ahead. I give
It's
you free range.
right. It was actually no, it wasn't Ian Lampert. It was something that Justin Bernstein told me after Gladiator, and something my coach Max Wang has told me a lot is the idea is basically you can't have a peak without a valley. And what that means is something I struggle with is I try to make everything big. But if every mountain is Mount Everest is not going to look very tall. So you have to allow yourself to just have some normal talking, nothing too flashy, just something a bit boring between the big moments to allow those big moments to stand out. So that's the concept application, I guess, for speeches. But this applies also for crosses and for every part of mock trial. In crosses, Dr. Lampert said something. He said, sit down and take a 10. What that means is basically keep your crosses short. If your crosses are 5 pockets long, nobody is going to listen. You're only going to lose points from there. And it's the same idea is if you have this one really good pocket, just have that one really good pocket. Sit down and take a 10. Don't try to have every single possible peak after that one really good pocket. Have those 2 excellent pockets, sit down, take your 10. You do your third pocket, fourth pocket, even if they're excellent, you're not going to get higher than a 10, you're only going to drop to like a 9 or an 8.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think that's what I would say is that idea of, if you want to be excellent, if you want to stand out, you have to allow moments where you're also in the dark. And so I think that's the concept that everyone should consider. And I think it's also a good application really just to apply everywhere.
Well, Alex, we've been yapping for quite some time. So to wrap up this episode, this up and coming year is your senior year. So is there any mock trial goals or hopes you have for this coming year?
Uh, Not the first semester because so basically until winter I want to make sure I'm focusing on applications, I guess. Second semester, so basically after January of 26, I'm gonna do so much mock trial. I'm just gonna be crazy. I'm just gonna try to have fun and have do new things. Hopefully go to Empire, hopefully go to TOC. I really want to go to Gladiator offline. It's gonna be in Philly or something, right? So I really
Yeah,
want
I
to be
think
there.
so.
Yeah, I really want to be there as like my last competition in high school. But that's my plan. And of course, what really matters to me is making sure that mock trial thrives in China and thrives at our school. And so I want to make sure I'm helping out there as well and seeing all these new competitors become great.
I think that's an excellent note to leave off on. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming on and sharing your tips and advice.
Oh, thank you so much, Christiana, for having me. I really enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
a lot of fun. And of course, fun has to end somewhere. So we're going to wrap up this episode of Mock Talk, your destination for all things mock trial. Keep mocking, and I'll see you next time.